Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, The Summons to Blackthorne. The rain had begun in the small hours, a steady, whispering drizzle that turned London streets into rivers of reflected lamplight. By breakfast time, it had deepened into a downpour, and the windows of Hercule Poirot's flat in Whitehaven Mansions were blurred by silver sheets of water. Inside, however, all was as immaculate as ever, not a cushion out of place, not a newspaper corner folded. The little Belgian detective sat at his polished table, sipping chocolate and inspecting his morning correspondence with the calm precision of a surgeon examining tissue under glass. Bills, advertisements, an invitation from a society for the study of crime statistics, misty, and finally, Poirot paused, his brows lifting as he held one envelope to the light. The paper was of excellent quality, faintly cream-colored, sealed with dark green wax, and addressed in a fine, looping hand. "This, mon ami Hastings," he said with satisfaction, "is not from one who writes without care." Captain Hastings looked up from his newspaper. "What is it this time, Poirot? Another widow troubled by spiritualists? Or some nobleman whose butler has absconded with the family silver?" Poirot smiled, cutting the envelope with a paper knife that gleamed like a scalpel. "Let us see, Hastings. Listen to this." He began to read aloud, the precise French tones giving the English words an added gravity. "Monsieur Poirot. Something monstrous has occurred at Blackthorne Abbey. A theft, horrid beyond words, has left us shaken and afraid. I cannot entrust this matter to the police, for fear of publicity and ridicule. I beg your discretion and your help. Come at once. Yours in deepest anxiety, Lady Constance Blackthorne." When he had finished, there was silence except for the rain drumming against the panes. Poirot turned the letter over, noting the faint scent of lavender and the small watermark of a Devonshire paper mill. He looked thoughtful. "A theft that is horrid," he murmured. "Not unfortunate or regrettable, but horrid. That, my friend, is an interesting choice of word." Hastings frowned. "She must mean some valuable heirloom stolen, jewels, perhaps, or paintings." None. Poirot wagged a finger. "Such things inspire greed, not horror. When one speaks of horror, one speaks of that which offends the emotions, the nerves, the imagination. This will be no ordinary theft, Hastings. I feel it here." He tapped his temple delicately. "The little grey cells are already awake." He rose and began to pace, his hands clasped neatly before him. Blackthorne Abbey. The name, it has the ring of old stones, of shadows, of secrets. "We shall go." Hastings stared. "Go to Devonshire? In this weather?" Poirot smiled with perfect serenity. "But of course. Crime, Hastings, does not wait upon the sunshine. Pack the essentials, Esselineuvausplat. The next train leaves Paddington at 9:30. The journey was long and damp. Beyond the window, the English countryside stretched grey and waterlogged, hedgerows dripping, the sky a dull pewter dome. Poirot, however, seemed undisturbed by the dismal view. He sat opposite Hastings in their first-class compartment, a small valise at his feet, his gloved hands resting neatly on his knees. "I have made some inquiries by telephone," he said at last. "Lady Constance Blackthorne, widow of Sir Robert Blackthorne, who died 2 years ago. The family seat, Blackthorne Abbey, stands near the village of Mentun, upon the edge of Dartmoor." Hastings looked up from his paper. "Dartmoor? Good heavens, that's grim country, wild moors, fog, and old prison tales." Not much of a place for a lady to live alone. Poirot gave a small shrug. Perhaps she enjoys solitude. Or perhaps she hides from something. ABN, we shall discover soon enough. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, his lips moving faintly as though rehearsing the details in order. Hastings had long since learned to respect this silence. It was the hum of the machine that was Poirot's mind, sorting, deducing, eliminating. At last, he opened his eyes and said softly, "Hastings, you observe how she writes horrid beyond words. The phrase is old-fashioned, sentimental, but sincere. It tells us that what has been taken is not a mere object, but something entwined with memory, with feeling. Something personal, then. Just so. And note that she fears ridicule if the police are called. Therefore, the object must be unusual. Perhaps sacred, perhaps," he paused, and a faint gleam lit his eyes, "perhaps connected with the dead." "The dead?" Hastings repeated, startled. "Surely you don't mean—" "I mean nothing yet," Poirot said calmly. "But I keep an open mind. Always." It was late afternoon when their train reached Manton Station, a lonely platform surrounded by sodden fields. A chauffeur awaited them beside a dark Daimler, his coat beaded with rain. "Lady Constance's car, sirs," he said with a bow. "It's a fair drive to the Abbey, nearly 10 miles across the moor." The road wound through a world of mist and silence. Low stone walls, half collapsed, lined the lanes, gnarled trees bent beneath the wind. Once or twice Hastings thought he saw a shape moving in the fog, a sheep, perhaps, or something else. Poirot sat upright, gazing ahead with keen interest. "Regard, Hastings," he murmured. "The moor, it is vast, desolate, triste. It breeds the imagination, does it not? One feels that the crimes committed here would not be of the petty sort." At last the car turned up a long gravel drive. Through the thinning mist rose the towers of Blackthorne Abbey, huge, ancient, and forbidding, their dark stone streaked by centuries of rain. A pair of carved griffins guarded the gate, the iron doors groaned as they opened. Within the courtyard, light flickered from narrow windows. The chauffeur led them through a great oak door into a hall so vast it seemed to swallow sound. A fire burned low in a marble hearth, throwing red shadows upon the banners that hung from the walls. Lady Constance awaited them at the foot of the staircase. She was tall, slender, and striking, though her face was pale and drawn. Her eyes, dark and restless, gave her the air of one who has not slept for many nights. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "thank you for coming so swiftly. You must forgive the gloom of the place, it has been a dreadful week." Poirot bowed deeply. "Madam, I am at your service. You spoke in your letter of a theft most terrible. Will you tell me more?" She glanced about the hall as though fearing eavesdroppers. "Not here. Come to the library." They followed her through long corridors lined with portraits, stern men, pale women, all bearing the Blackthorne look of pride edged with melancholy. At last they entered the library, a room panelled in oak and smelling faintly of old paper and damp stone. Lady Constance turned, her voice low but steady. "The theft occurred last night," she said. "From the chapel crypt." Poirot inclined his head. "Ah. Then it is as I suspected, not jewels, not art." "No," she said, clasping her hands tightly. "It is the coffin of my ancestor, Sir Alaric Blackthorne. It has been broken open. His body is gone." For a moment even Poirot was silent. Outside, the wind rose and moaned across the moor. Hastings felt a chill run down his spine. Poirot's voice, when it came, was very quiet. "Mon Dieu. A theft of the dead. Indeed, Lady Constance, you were right. This is something monstrous." Chapter 2, The Abbey in Shadow. For a long moment after Lady Constance's terrible declaration, the three of them stood in the library without speaking. The only sound was the low hiss of the fire and the distant sigh of wind beneath the doors. Poirot, immaculately still, regarded Lady Constance with eyes that missed nothing, the tremor in her hands, the quiver at her throat, the way her gaze flickered toward the window as though seeking escape. At last he said gently, "Madam, you must forgive me if I seem abrupt. But you say the body is gone? You are quite certain it has not been moved for some family reason?" She drew herself up, her dignity wounded. "Moved? Certainly not. The Blackthornes have been buried in that crypt for centuries. Sir Alaric's coffin was sealed 300 years ago. No one had cause to touch it until last night." Poirot inclined his head. "You will permit me one question more. Who first discovered this outrage?" "My husband, Sir Henry," she said. "He went to the chapel early this morning, intending to inspect the damp on the north wall. He found the door unlocked and," she shuddered, "and the coffin prized open, the lid splintered. I went with him. There were marks on the floor, as though something heavy had been dragged away." Hastings, who had been listening with horrified fascination, burst out, "But surely, Lady Constance, you sent for the police." Sir Henry himself entered at that moment, saving her the trouble of reply. He was a tall man in his 50s, with iron-grey hair and a face carved in lines of impatience. His voice, when he spoke, was brisk and slightly contemptuous. "The police, Captain Hastings, are precisely what we do not want. You must understand, Blackthorne Abbey is an ancient name, and scandal clings like mildew. If this becomes public, we shall have half the countryside gossiping about ghosts and curses." Poirot bowed slightly. "Ah, so Madame wrote to me without your knowledge." Sir Henry's brows drew together. "That's true enough. I'd have preferred to keep the matter private altogether. But my wife has always believed in consulting experts." His tone made the word sound faintly absurd. "Still, you're here now, so I suppose you'd best see the thing for yourself." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A most reasonable suggestion, monsieur. If we may go to the chapel." Sir Henry led the way through a maze of stone corridors lit by smoking lamps. Their footsteps echoed. Hastings could not help feeling that unseen eyes watched them from every shadow. The Abbey seemed alive, but with the slow, breathing life of something old and burdened by memory. At last they emerged into the courtyard. The rain had ceased, leaving the night raw and windless. Against the far wall rose the chapel, small, ancient, and severe, its narrow windows like blind eyes. Sir Henry produced a key, hesitated, and unlocked the heavy door. The air inside was chill and still. Candles flickered on the altar, their flames bending slightly as the door closed behind them. The floor was paved with worn slabs, each carved with names almost lost to time. To the right, a narrow stair descended beneath the choir. "The crypt," Sir Henry said shortly. Poirot and Hastings followed. The steps twisted steeply downwards into darkness. A damp odour of stone and decay grew stronger with each turn. At the bottom lay a chamber lined with niches where ancient coffins rested under dust. The air was thick, close, it seemed to press upon the lungs. "There," said Sir Henry, raising his lantern. "Sir Alaric's tomb." The coffin stood upon a stone dais in the centre of the chamber. Its lid had indeed been forced open, the wood splintered and jagged. Inside was nothing but fragments of rotted lining and a smear of dust, and something white that caught the light. Hastings leaned forward. "A feather!" Poirot stooped delicately. Between his fingers he lifted the object, a single long feather, white as snow, perfectly clean despite the grime around it. "A curious token," he murmured. "A swan's feather, if I am not mistaken. And not newly fallen, there is a faint scent upon it. Lavender, perhaps." Yes. Lavender. He replaced it carefully. Sir Henry, who besides yourself has access to this crypt? No one, said Sir Henry curtly. The key is kept in my study. The old caretaker, Murdoch, was dismissed last month, unreliable fellow. Since then, no one comes down here. Poirot turned slowly, studying the chamber. Yet the door to the chapel was found unlocked this morning, was it not? It was, Sir Henry admitted. Though I swear I locked it myself after yesterday's service. Poirot said softly, so someone within the Abbey had knowledge of both keys, or of another way. Lady Constance shivered. Do you mean, one of us? I mean, madam, said Poirot with gentle firmness, that whoever committed this act is no stranger. One does not break into a family crypt for profit. This is something intimate, perhaps symbolic. He examined the floor. See, Hastings, the marks where something was dragged, yes, but not the width of a man's shoulders. Narrower. As if a box had been pulled, but look closer. These scratches are old in parts, new in others. There was movement here before last night. Sir Henry frowned. What are you suggesting? Nothing yet, monsieur. I only remark that the coffin has been tampered with more than once. Perhaps to open, perhaps to examine, perhaps to remove. We shall see. Poirot then noticed a dark patch near the wall, candle wax hardened against the stone. He touched it lightly. Green wax. A most unusual color for devotion. Tell me, who in the household burns green candles? Lady Constance looked puzzled. I do not know. We use only white in the chapel. Poirot nodded, eyes bright. Then someone brought their own. Très interessant. They left the crypt, the echo of their steps rising behind them like sighs. In the corridor above, Lady Constance stopped and pressed a hand to her brow. Monsieur Poirot, she said faintly, you spoke of symbolism, of something intimate. Do you truly believe this is no mere theft? Poirot regarded her with quiet compassion. Madam, there are crimes of the hands and crimes of the heart. The first steals what is valuable. The second, what is sacred. I think this theft belongs to the second kind. Hastings glanced at him sharply. You mean someone here, someone in the Abbey, took the body for what reason, Poirot? He smiled faintly. Mon ami, you must not leap to conclusions. Perhaps to conceal something. Perhaps to prove something. Or perhaps, to keep a secret buried. Lady Constance gave a small cry. Then we are not safe. Poirot bowed. You are safe, madam, for I am here. And until the mystery of Sir Alaric's missing remains is solved, I shall not leave Blackthorne Abbey. They returned to the library, where a supper tray awaited. The fire burned brighter now, casting light on the portraits that lined the walls, grim faces whose eyes seemed to follow their every movement. Poirot ate sparingly, his mind clearly elsewhere. He made polite conversation with Sir Henry, who drank heavily and avoided his wife's gaze. When the servants had withdrawn, Poirot spoke suddenly. One small thing, Sir Henry. You said the caretaker was dismissed last month. For what reason? Neglect of duty, said Sir Henry shortly. He was drunk, lazy, and superstitious. Claimed to hear voices in the crypt. Indeed. Poirot said softly. And where does this Murdoch live now? In the village, I believe. But you'll get little sense from him. Poirot rose, adjusting his tie with neat fingers. I have often found that those who hear voices sometimes hear truths others miss. Tomorrow, I think, we shall pay him a visit. Lady Constance rose also. Monsieur Poirot, she said earnestly, if you can bring peace to this house, you will have my everlasting gratitude. There has been a shadow upon Blackthorne these many years. Perhaps it has finally risen. Poirot looked at her long and steadily. Perhaps, he said. Or perhaps, madam, it has merely changed its form. That night, as Hastings prepared for bed in his draughty room, he heard the wind moaning through the chimneys like a distant lament. Somewhere in the Abbey a door creaked. He could not sleep. Below, in his chamber, Poirot sat awake by candlelight, gazing at the feather he had taken from the crypt, white, delicate, and faintly perfumed. One plume blanche, he murmured. The symbol of innocence, or of mockery. We shall see which it is. He placed it carefully beside his watch and extinguished the light. Outside, Blackthorne Abbey slept under a pall of mist, and the moor beyond whispered secrets to the wind. Chapter 3: The Household of Secrets. Breakfast at Blackthorne Abbey was a sombre affair. The long oak table could have seated 20, yet only 5 places were laid. The fire struggled to warm the high, draughty hall, and the rain drummed faintly against the tall mullioned windows. Servants moved silently, their eyes lowered, as though even the clatter of plates might disturb the uneasy peace that had settled over the house. Hercule Poirot, neat as ever in a grey suit and perfectly brushed moustache, surveyed the table's occupants with polite curiosity. To his right sat Sir Henry Blackthorne, grimly buttering toast as if waging war upon it. Opposite him, Lady Constance sipped her tea, pale and distracted. Next to her sat Miss Lydia Gray, the governess, a small, nervous woman in her late 20s, who flinched whenever anyone spoke too loudly. And at the far end, reading a newspaper with self-satisfied absorption, was Mr. Abel Finch, the family solicitor. Poirot, ever the observer, took in everything, the flicker of Lady Constance's eyes towards her husband, Finch's slight smirk when she looked away, the way Lydia Gray's hands trembled as she poured milk into her cup. He spoke lightly. Such a beautiful morning, is it not? The mist rises, and with it, perhaps, also the truth. Sir Henry gave a short laugh. You'll find little beauty here, Monsieur Poirot. Only damp walls and old legends. My wife insists upon keeping this place open. I'd have preferred to sell it years ago. Come now, Henry, Lady Constance said, reproach softening her tone. It is our home. It's a mausoleum, he muttered. Poirot smiled gently. A house may be what one makes of it, monsieur. A refuge, or a prison. There was an uncomfortable silence, broken only when the butler entered with the Morning Post. Finch, the solicitor, accepted a letter and slipped it quickly into his pocket without reading it. Poirot noticed, Hastings, seated beside him, did not. When breakfast ended, Poirot rose and addressed the company. Mesdames et messieurs, I must thank you for your courtesy. Now, if it pleases you, I should like to speak with each of you in turn. It is my habit, a little order in the confusion, you understand. I find that even in the grandest houses, truth often hides in small corners. Sir Henry grunted. If it'll help you finish this business quickly, by all means. Poirot's first interview was with Miss Lydia Gray, held in the morning room where a single fire struggled against the chill. She perched on the edge of a chair, her thin hands clasped tightly together. Mademoiselle, Poirot began kindly, you have been long in the service of Lady Constance. Nearly 5 years, sir. Ah, and you are devoted to her. Yes, Monsieur Poirot. Lady Constance has always been good to me. Poirot inclined his head. Last night, mademoiselle, did you notice anything unusual? A sound? A movement in the corridors. Lydia hesitated, glancing toward the door. I thought I heard footsteps outside my room near midnight. Heavy ones, going toward the chapel wing. I opened my door, but saw only the lantern light at the far end of the hall. And did you recognize the figure? No. I thought, she faltered, I thought it might have been Sir Henry. Poirot smiled slightly. Why Sir Henry? He often walks at night when he cannot sleep, she whispered. But this time, he was carrying something, a bundle, perhaps. I am not sure. I only know I was frightened. Poirot watched her closely. Frightened of what, mademoiselle? I don't know, she said after a pause. Perhaps of the Abbey itself. It never feels quiet, even when no one speaks. Merci, mademoiselle. You have helped more than you think. Next came Mr. Abel Finch, the solicitor, round, self-assured, and perpetually amused by his own wit. He entered the library puffing a cigar, and took a seat uninvited. So, Monsieur Poirot, he said, you're to play bloodhound among our skeletons, eh? Well, good luck. I dare say you'll find plenty. Poirot regarded him mildly. I find it curious, Monsieur Finch, that you joke when a most unholy crime has occurred. Finch chuckled. Oh, come now, a coffin disturbed, a few old bones misplaced. It's macabre, I'll grant, but hardly murder. Poirot's voice was cool. The desecration of the dead is no jest, monsieur. It speaks of passion, or of fear. Fear. Finch's smile tightened. Whose fear, exactly? Perhaps your own, said Poirot softly. You were the family's legal adviser for many years, I believe. Indeed. Handled Sir Robert's affairs before his death, and Lady Constance's inheritance after. Why? Poirot toyed with a paperweight on the desk. Sir Robert's will, it left the Abbey entirely to Lady Constance. Of course. Sir Henry is her husband now, but the estate remains hers by law. Interesting, murmured Poirot. And if scandal touched the family name? Finch shrugged. Then its value would drop, certainly. But that's hardly my concern. Poirot smiled thinly. Au contraire, monsieur, I think everything here concerns you. When Finch had gone, Poirot examined the ashtray. Beneath the solicitor's cigar end was a faint smear of green wax. He pocketed it discreetly. His final conversation that morning was with Sir Henry himself. The baronet received him in the study, a heavy room smelling of tobacco and damp paper. Above the mantel hung the portrait of Sir Alaric Blackthorne, stern-eyed in armour, one hand resting on a sword. Poirot began softly, Sir Henry, you were the first to enter the crypt this morning. I was, Sir Henry said shortly. And you swear you locked the chapel door the night before? I did. And I still don't understand how anyone else could have entered. There are no spare keys. Poirot's gaze flickered toward the desk. And yet the chapel key hangs there, does it not? Sir Henry followed his glance. Yes. Always has. Poirot nodded. It is curious, then, that the key shows no trace of recent use, no damp, no grit from the chapel door. I examined it just now. Sir Henry scowled. What are you implying? That perhaps another key was used, monsieur. Or a copy. He paced slowly, his small patent leather shoes making no sound on the rug. You spoke of your wife's wish to keep the Abbey. You do not share it. I've told you, I hate the place. It's cursed ground. My family's money is gone, and all this damp stone eats what's left. But Constance clings to it for sentiment. Then perhaps someone wishes to frighten her from it, Poirot said softly. To make the Abbey uninhabitable, spiritually, at least. Sir Henry laughed harshly. You mean to say this is some elaborate trick? A ghostly farce? I mean to say, Poirot replied, that every ghost has a human accomplice. He left Sir Henry glowering at the fire. Later, Hastings found Poirot standing at the great staircase, gazing up at the portraits that lined the walls. Well, Poirot, Hastings asked, what do you make of them all? Poirot smiled faintly. Each person here wears a mask, mon ami. The lady hides sorrow, the husband hides resentment, the governess hides fear, and the solicitor hides ambition. The question is, which of these masks conceals guilt? And the feather? Hastings asked. What do you think it means? Poirot's eyes gleamed. It is a message, Hastings, a symbol chosen with care. A white feather, in English custom, is a sign of cowardice. But in religion, it stands for the soul's release. Which meaning applies here? That, we must discover. He turned toward the great doors that opened onto the misty courtyard. Come, Hastings. There is one more member of this household we have not yet met, the Abbey itself. Let us walk its corridors and see what secrets it whispers. As they passed along the echoing halls, the air grew colder. Somewhere distant, a door closed softly. Poirot stopped, his head tilted. You hear that, Hastings? The wind, perhaps. Poirot shook his head. No. Not the wind. Someone moves when we move. He smiled slightly, almost with pleasure. Excellent. It means the guilty one already fears discovery. Outside, the last of the rain ceased, and faint sunlight touched the Abbey's dark towers. But the light did not reach its heart. In the shadowed halls of Blackthorne, secrets lingered, and Poirot, his little grey cells alert and shining, was determined to unearth them. Chapter 4: The Midnight Intruder. The hours following the theft were heavy with unease. By the time the last constable departed and the guests had retreated to their rooms, a thick silence settled over Ravenwell Hall, the kind that pressed upon the nerves and made every creak of timber sound like a footstep. Outside, the storm had abated, but the wind still sighed against the tall windows as if whispering secrets through the cracks. Hercule Poirot had retired neither to bed nor to ease. Instead, he sat in the small library adjoining the great hall, a delicate porcelain cup before him, filled with what he called an abominably English tea. He sipped it with a faint grimace, then set it down precisely on its saucer. Mon ami, said Poirot softly, addressing Inspector Flint who stood by the fire, there is something here that does not align, no, that refuses to align. The jewels are gone, yes, but the manner of their going speaks of a mind, how do you say, too organized, too deliberate for a mere crime of opportunity. Flint rubbed his chin. Could have been an inside job. The staff knew the layout, and the storm gave good cover. I'll be questioning them again first thing in the morning. Poirot inclined his head. Indeed. Yet you forget, my friend, that the thief also knew something else, that Lady Ravenwell keeps the key to the jewel cabinet upon her person. It was taken from her chamber, non. The inspector nodded grimly. Aye. Lockbox keys gone from her dressing table. She swears she left it there before the ball began. Then we must consider, said Poirot, that the thief was in her chamber at some point during the evening, possibly while she was entertaining the guests below. But tell me, how could such a person move unnoticed through the upper corridors when so many servants were about? Unless, he leaned back, fingers pressed together. Unless he belonged to the house himself. Before Flint could reply, the door opened quietly, and Lady Ravenwell herself appeared. Her pale face was framed by dishevelled curls, and her eyes were red-rimmed from weeping. She held a candle in one trembling hand. Monsieur Poirot, she whispered, I beg your pardon for disturbing you, but I cannot sleep. There are sounds, faint ones, in the east wing. Like footsteps where none should be. Flint straightened. The east wing's locked off at night, my lady. No one supposed to be there. Then someone is disobeying your orders, she said, the candlelight flickering across her anxious features. Poirot rose smoothly. Come, Inspector. A promenade nocturne may yet prove instructive. The east wing of Ravenwell Hall stretched away from the main staircase like a long, shadowed arm. Once it had been the nursery and family quarters, but Lady Ravenwell had closed it years ago after her husband's death. Now it lay silent, its portraits veiled and rooms draped in white sheets. Poirot's small lantern threw trembling circles of light along the corridor. The air smelled of dust and neglect. Somewhere far off, a shutter banged softly in the wind. Suddenly, Flint halted. "Did you hear that?" A faint scraping noise came from behind a closed door, the last on the right. Poirot gestured for silence. The inspector moved forward, hand on the revolver at his belt, and threw open the door. The room beyond was dim, lit only by moonlight spilling through tall windows. In the center stood a large writing desk, its drawers half open. A dark shape bent over it. "Stop right there!" Flint barked. The figure straightened, a man in evening clothes, his face half hidden by the shadow of a curtain. For one tense moment, all was still. Then the man darted sideways toward the window. Flint lunged, but too late, the intruder flung open the casement and vanished into the night. Flint reached the sill, peering down into the darkness. "Blasted fool's gone down the ivy. I'll have the ground searched at once." Poirot, however, did not rush. He walked to the desk, examining it with keen eyes. On the surface lay a scattering of papers, an overturned inkwell, and a torn fragment of cloth caught on a drawer handle, dark velvet, embroidered faintly with gold thread. "Ah," murmured Poirot. "The careless hand leaves behind the truth, even when it would flee." Lady Ravenwell, who had remained in the doorway, pressed a hand to her throat. "Do you think he was after the jewels, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot turned the cloth over between his fingers. "Perhaps. Or perhaps something of equal value to the mind, if not the purse. Tell me, madam, whose room was this once?" She hesitated. "It was my husband's study. He kept his correspondence here. I seldom come." "Indeed." Poirot placed the cloth carefully on the desk. "And when he died, did you happen to destroy his papers?" Her eyes widened. "No. They were left as they were. The room was sealed afterward." "Sealed?" Poirot arched an eyebrow. "Yet the lock shows signs of recent use. See, the metal is freshly scratched. Someone has been here before tonight." Flint looked uneasy. "So the thief's been prowling these rooms for days, maybe weeks. That explains why no one saw anything tonight. He knows the place." "Quite," said Poirot. "And note this, mon cher, the dust upon the floor bears the marks of small, precise shoes. Not boots. Not those of a servant or labourer. These belong to one who moves with care, accustomed to refinement. A gentleman, perhaps, or a lady." Lady Ravenwell swayed slightly, and Poirot guided her gently to a chair. "Courage, madam. The truth is seldom so terrible as our imaginings." She gave a tremulous smile. "You are very kind, Monsieur Poirot. But I cannot help thinking this has something to do with my husband's past. There were things he never spoke of letters he would burn late at night. And that chest." "What chest, madam?" "In the corner, behind the screen. It belonged to him. I believe it still contains his private papers. I have not opened it since his death." Flint moved to it and tested the lock. "It's fastened tight." Poirot's eyes gleamed. A locked chest in a locked room, always, it conceals something of importance. Let us see if our intruder saw what lies within. He crouched, examining the brass lock plate. Recently tampered with, see the minute indentations around the keyhole? Someone attempted a crude entry. Flint frowned. Then he failed, and came back tonight to finish the job. Perhaps, said Poirot softly. But why choose tonight, with the house so full of guests and constables? That, Inspector, is what we must ask ourselves. When they returned to the main hall, the fire had died to embers. Poirot stood before it, lost in thought. Lady Ravenwell had gone to rest, escorted by her maid. Flint paced restlessly, muttering about doubling the watch. At last Poirot said, "Mon ami, there is a pattern here, faint as yet, but it exists." The jewels were but the beginning, a smoke-screen to conceal another purpose. Someone seeks not fortune, but knowledge, a truth buried in this house long ago. Flint stopped pacing. You think this ties back to Lord Ravenwell's death? Poirot's eyes were distant, reflective. Perhaps. The past, Inspector, is never truly dead. It lies waiting, like a ghost behind a locked door, and tonight, that door has begun to open. Outside, the wind moaned again through the chimneys. And somewhere deep in the east wing, behind the sealed study door, a faint, rhythmic tapping began, soft and deliberate, like fingers against a wooden lid. Poirot listened. His expression did not change, but his voice was quiet and certain when he spoke. "The game, my friend," he murmured, "has only just begun." Chapter 5, Shadows of the Past. Morning dawned grey and windless over Ravenwell Hall. The storm had passed, but its traces remained, branches strewn across the gravel drive, puddles gleaming on the terrace, and a faint scent of damp earth drifting through the open windows. Inside, however, the air was far from fresh. It was heavy with suspicion. The servants moved in hushed tones, the guests kept to their rooms, and Lady Ravenwell's eyes seemed perpetually red from sleeplessness. The theft of the jewels, the mysterious intruder, the sealed study, all had left the house trembling with unease. Hercule Poirot, however, appeared untroubled. He sat at breakfast, neat as ever, trimming the crusts from his toast with surgical precision. Across the table, Inspector Flint looked haggard and unshaven, his coffee untouched. "You'll forgive me, Monsieur Poirot," said Flint, "but I cannot fathom how you can eat so calmly after last night's business. We've a thief loose, possibly a murderer in the making, and not a trace to go on." Poirot dabbed his lips delicately with a napkin. "My dear Inspector, to think clearly, one must eat clearly. The stomach empty, the brain too becomes hollow. Now, what do we know?" Flint sighed. "We know that someone entered the east wing between midnight and 1 o'clock, rifled through Lord Ravenwell's old study, and made off before I could reach the window. We found footprints beneath the ivy, but they lead to the garden wall and vanish." "And the piece of velvet?" Poirot asked mildly. "Sent to London for analysis, nothing yet." Poirot nodded approvingly. "Très bien." "And the chest?" "Locked still. We daren't force it without Lady Ravenwell's leave." "Which," Poirot murmured, "we shall have before the morning is done." By 10 o'clock, they stood once again in the shadowed east wing. Dust mote swirled in the pale light filtering through the curtains. Lady Ravenwell entered hesitantly, a small brass key in her trembling hand. "I had it on my chain all these years," she said softly. "I almost forgot where it fit." Flint took the key and crouched before the old chest. With a click, the lock gave way. The lid creaked open, exhaling a faint breath of age. Inside lay bundles of yellowed letters, a few ledgers, and a velvet pouch. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Do not touch yet, Illinois Vals Plat." He drew on his gloves and gently lifted the pouch. It was heavy, the fabric worn thin. When he loosened the string, something metallic clinked within. He poured the contents onto the desk, a small collection of medals, 2 signet rings, and a rusted key, long, ornate, of an older design than any in the house. Lady Ravenwell gave a start. That belonged to my husband." "But what could it open?" Poirot did not answer. Instead, he opened one of the ledgers. Inside, the neat handwriting of Lord Ravenwell filled the pages, columns of figures, initials, and short cryptic notes: DL, due on receipt, ML, secured by chest, payment to HV confirmed. Flint scowled. Looks like financial dealings. Debts, maybe. Was the late lord mixed up in something shady? Lady Ravenwell drew herself up. My husband was a gentleman. Poirot's voice was gentle. Madam, even gentlemen may have secrets. We do not yet know whether these are dark or merely delicate. He turned to the last page. The handwriting here was hurried, uneven. It read, "If anything befalls me, the truth lies beneath the raven's gaze." Poirot read it aloud. Flint frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Ah, said Poirot softly. A riddle. And who, my friend, can resist a riddle? He rose and looked around the room, eyes darting over the portraits, the bookshelves, the dusty ornaments. Finally, he stopped before the great fireplace. Above it hung a massive oil painting, a raven perched upon a skull, its black wings spread against a crimson sky. Poirot's finger traced the frame. Beneath the raven's gaze, he repeated. The clue is literal, I think. He pressed lightly on the lower frame, and a small panel clicked open. Flint let out a low whistle. Hidden behind the panel was a narrow compartment, containing a single folded sheet of parchment. Poirot unfolded it. Inside was a map, rough, hand-drawn, showing the grounds of Ravenwell Hall. A small X marked a spot near the old chapel at the edge of the woods. Flint stared. So that's what the intruder was after. Something buried out there. Perhaps, Poirot murmured. But remember, he searched the desk before he searched the chest. He did not know where to look. Now we do. The chapel lay beyond the gardens, a crumbling structure half swallowed by ivy. It had not been used for years. The stained glass windows were broken, the altar green with moss. Flint pushed open the rotting door. Looks like no one's been here in decades. Poirot stepped inside, his patent leather shoes gleaming incongruously in the gloom. He studied the floor, cracked flagstones, overgrown with lichen. Then, near the far wall, he stopped. There, he said quietly. The ground has been disturbed. Indeed, a patch of earth near the old font looked freshly turned. Flint knelt, scooping away the soil with his hands. Within minutes, his fingers struck wood. Together they lifted out a small wooden box, no larger than a hat case. Its brass fittings were green with corrosion, but the lock was intact. Poirot held up the rusted key from the chest, it fit perfectly. He turned it with a soft click. Inside lay a stack of letters, bound with faded ribbon, and on top, a photograph. Poirot picked it up. The image showed Lord Ravenwell standing beside a young woman, her expression serious, almost fearful. On the back, in the same hurried hand as the ledger, were the words, "To Eliza." "Forgive me." Lady Ravenwell gasped. "Eliza! That was our housemaid, she disappeared 10 years ago. We thought she'd left without notice." Flint's eyes darkened. "And what if she didn't leave, my lady? What if something happened to her here?" Poirot was silent, leafing through the letters. They were written by Eliza herself, a desperate, pleading tone ran through them. "You promised you would tell her. You cannot let me vanish like this." The last letter ended abruptly, "If you do not come tonight, I shall go to her myself." Lady Ravenwell sank into a pew. "He betrayed me, and her." Poirot closed the box gently. "It seems, madam, that your husband feared exposure, and someone now seeks to resurrect that buried shame." Flint rubbed the back of his neck. So whoever broke in last night wanted these letters to blackmail Lady Ravenwell. Poirot nodded. Just so. And yet they failed. But they will try again. For now, we must be discreet, and we must watch. He looked toward the high window, where a shaft of pale sunlight broke through the gloom. There is one who knows the full story, he said softly. The question is, who among us has been waiting for 10 years to see justice done? Chapter 6, The Trap at Midnight. The dusk fell early that evening, spreading a veil of violet and silver across the grounds of Ravenwell Hall. The great house stood in somber silence, its many windows glinting faintly like watchful eyes. Inside, tension coiled unseen through every corridor. Hercule Poirot sat in the drawing room, immaculately dressed in his grey suit and patent shoes, polishing his moustache before the mirror. To a casual observer, he appeared at ease, but to those who knew him, the precision of his movements betrayed deep concentration. Inspector Flint entered, his heavy boots dull against the carpet. It's near 10 o'clock, Poirot. The men are in position. 2 constables in the garden, one by the east wing entrance, and I'll take the main hall myself. If our man returns for those letters, we'll have him. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Excellent, mon ami. And Lady Ravenwell? In her room. I've told her to stay there and lock the door. Ah, murmured Poirot. Then all is in readiness, except one small thing. Flint frowned. And what's that? Poirot adjusted his tie with delicate fingers. The understanding of motive. For a thief to risk so much, there must be passion, hatred, or guilt. But which? He looked at the inspector with a faint smile. Let us see what the night reveals, eh? By 11, the household slept, or pretended to. The corridors lay dim under the flickering light of a few wall lamps. Outside, a thin mist crept over the lawns, softening the moonlight to a milky haze. Somewhere, an owl hooted. Poirot and Flint waited in the library, their lanterns extinguished. Upon the desk sat the wooden box from the chapel, its letters carefully restored to their place. To any eye, it appeared untouched. But within, beneath the top sheet, Poirot had placed a small silver bell connected to a thread that ran across the carpet to where he sat hidden in shadow. A child's toy, perhaps, he had told Flint earlier with a wink. But effective. The hand that lifts the letters shall ring its own confession. Now they waited in silence, the great clock in the hall marking each minute with solemn regularity. Then, a sound. Soft, deliberate. The faintest creak of a floorboard from the corridor beyond. Poirot raised a hand, motioning Flint to stillness. The door opened. A narrow shaft of light fell across the desk. A figure slipped inside, moving swiftly, noiselessly, dressed in dark clothing, face half covered by a scarf. The intruder went straight to the box, lifted the lid, and reached for the letters. The bell gave a delicate ting. Poirot rose like a cat. Bonsoir, mon ami. The night air is cool, and yet you perspire. The figure spun around. For a heartbeat, all was frozen, then, with a curse, the intruder bolted for the door. Flint lunged forward, blocking the way. There was a brief struggle, a muffled cry, and the scarf fell away. Poirot stepped closer, lantern in hand. The light fell upon a pale, terrified face. Mr. Harold Vale, he said quietly. I feared as much. Lady Ravenwell's cousin stared back, breathing hard. You've no proof of anything, he spat. I came here to protect my cousin's interests. Protect them? Poirot echoed, lifting an eyebrow. By stealing her husband's secrets. Flint clapped a hand on Vale's shoulder. Enough. You'll tell us the truth at the station. But Poirot raised a hand. Wait, my friend. I think Monsieur Vale would prefer to speak here, before the lady of the house. Lady Ravenwell entered moments later, pale and trembling in her dressing gown. When she saw Vale standing between Poirot and the inspector, her hand flew to her mouth. "Harold! What is this?" He avoided her gaze. "I never meant you harm, cousin. I swear it. I only wanted to stop you from discovering what those letters contained." Poirot spoke gently. "And why, Monsieur Vale, should that concern you so greatly?" Vale's voice cracked. "Because I knew. I knew about Eliza. I knew your husband had ruined her, and I helped him hide it. I was young, and he promised me money, position, when she disappeared. I told myself it was better not to ask where she'd gone." Lady Ravenwell sank into a chair, tears glistening. "And now you would silence her memory?" He shook his head miserably. "No. Someone sent me a note 3 days ago, unsigned, saying that the truth would come out, that the letters would be found. I panicked. I thought if I destroyed them, none of us need suffer." Poirot watched him closely. "So you admit you broke into the study, and later, the library?" "Yes." "Then tell me, how did you know of the map hidden behind the painting? That detail, surely, was not in the note." Vale hesitated. I overheard you, Poirot. Yesterday morning, when you spoke to the inspector in the hall. I followed you to the East Wing last night, waiting for a chance to get the letters before you did. But when I saw the constables, I fled." Poirot nodded slowly. "Ah, très bien. That explains your presence. But it does not explain one thing." He lifted the piece of velvet from the desk, the same fragment found during the first night's intrusion. "This, Monsieur Vale, was torn from your jacket pocket, n'est-ce pas?" Vale stared, speechless. Poirot's tone softened. "It is no crime to wish to protect your family, monsieur, but secrets, once unearthed, do not easily return to the grave." And yet, he looked thoughtfully toward Lady Ravenwell. "You are not, I think, the only one who has prowled these corridors at night." Flint blinked. "What do you mean?" Poirot turned toward the door. "Madame Ravenwell, I fear there is another among your household who has taken too keen an interest in these affairs. Someone who knew both Eliza and your late husband, and who sent the note to Monsieur Vale." Lady Ravenwell frowned. "But who?" Poirot smiled faintly. "We shall know soon. For I expect them to visit this room before dawn." They waited again in silence, Vale seated and sullen under guard. Outside, the mist thickened, wrapping the windows in ghostly white. At 2 o'clock, a faint rattle came from the corridor, then the soft pad of footsteps. The door opened slowly. It was Mrs. Hughes, the housekeeper. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. "Madam," said Poirot gently, "you come to seek what was once yours." She froze, trembling. "You know." "Yes," said Poirot softly. "Eliza was your sister." A low sob broke from her throat. "He destroyed her, Monsieur Poirot. She loved him, and he cast her aside. When she found she was with child, she came to me, but by then it was too late. She vanished into the marshes that night. They said she drowned, but I never found her. I wanted the truth known, I wanted him shamed, even in death." Lady Ravenwell covered her face, weeping quietly. Poirot bowed his head. "And so you sent the note, hoping to frighten Monsieur Vale into revealing himself. But when he did not, you returned, perhaps even that first night, to take the letters yourself." Mrs. Hughes nodded faintly. "I only meant to keep them safe. For her memory." Flint sighed. "It's a wretched business, Poirot. What do we do with her?" Poirot shook his head. She has committed no crime that justice need pursue. The dead cannot accuse, and the living, perhaps, have suffered enough. He turned to Lady Ravenwell. Madam, your husband's sins lie buried no longer. But you may yet bring peace to your house, and to those who served it faithfully. Lady Ravenwell rose slowly and placed a trembling hand upon Mrs. Hughes's shoulder. We shall speak tomorrow, she said softly. And perhaps, together, we shall put the past to rest. Poirot inclined his head. So ends one mystery, Inspector. Yet I fancy there remains one small detail to confirm before I take my leave. Flint looked puzzled. And what's that? Poirot smiled, his eyes glinting with quiet satisfaction. Only this, mon ami, that the human heart, too, leaves its footprints, if one has but the patience to look. Outside, the mist began to lift, and the first pale light of dawn touched the windows of Ravenwell Hall. Inside, Hercule Poirot stood by the dying fire, eyes distant, moustache immaculate, and knew that the truth, once again, had walked out of shadow into light. Chapter 7: The Whisper in the Walls. The following morning dawned pale and uncertain, a thin light struggling through low clouds that hung over the estate like a shroud. Ravenwell Hall seemed quieter than ever, not with peace, but with exhaustion. The events of the night had left every soul within its walls uneasy. Lady Ravenwell took breakfast in her sitting room, attended silently by Mrs. Hughes, whose face was drawn but composed. The housekeeper's confession had shaken the household, but Poirot had requested that no one speak of it beyond these walls. The dead, he had said softly, deserved dignity, and the living, discretion. In the library, Poirot was already at work. His small notebook lay open beside a cup of cocoa, for he had firmly rejected English coffee as an abomination. Inspector Flint entered, looking more rested than usual but still perplexed. Well, Poirot, he said, rubbing his hands before the fire, I suppose we've done what we came for. The thief unmasked, the lady at peace, or near enough. What remains? Poirot looked up from his notes, his green eyes sharp. What remains, my friend, is the truth. Flint frowned. I thought we had it. Ah, no. We have only a truth. The story told by Mrs. Hughes explains much, but not all. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Tell me, Inspector, if her motive was to avenge her sister, why did she wait 10 years? Why send a letter to Monsieur Vale instead of confronting Lady Ravenwell herself? And above all, why risk breaking into the study before the map was discovered? Flint scratched his head. Perhaps she feared exposure. Perhaps, Poirot murmured. Yet something in her tone spoke not of fear, but of guilt. There is another layer to this tale, something left unsaid. And I, Hercule Poirot, do not rest while a single puzzle piece lies unplaced. After breakfast, Poirot sought out Mrs. Hughes in the east corridor, where she was overseeing the polishing of the oak floorboards. The morning light fell upon her silvered hair, and her posture was as rigid as the broom she held. Madam, said Poirot softly, I would have a word, if you please. She turned, wary but courteous. Of course, Monsieur Poirot. He studied her face. Last night, you spoke of your sister's death, of her despair and of the shame that followed. You said she drowned in the marshes. Tell me, were you certain of that? Her expression faltered. We never found her body. But there was no doubt. She'd spoken of ending it all. And after that night, she was gone. Poirot's gaze was keen. Gone, yes. But not necessarily dead. Mrs. Hughes looked startled. What are you implying? He clasped his hands. When we examined the letters in the chest, one bore a date later than the day your sister was said to have vanished. Its handwriting matched hers perfectly. How do you explain that, madam? She stared at him, pale. I don't know. Perhaps my memory failed me. Perhaps, said Poirot quietly. Or perhaps someone wished you to believe your sister was dead, when in truth she was alive, hidden, perhaps even imprisoned. Tell me, did anyone else in this household know of her condition? Mrs. Hughes hesitated. The gardener, maybe. Old Ben Holt. He'd known Eliza since she was a child. But he left shortly after her disappearance. No one's seen him since. Poirot's brow furrowed. Ah. A gardener who leaves without word, a girl who vanishes without trace, and both connected by silence. Very curious, indeed. He bowed slightly. Merci, madam. You have been most helpful. Later that afternoon, Poirot and Flint ventured to the rear gardens, where the old greenhouse stood in ruin. The glass panes were streaked with grime, the door hanging crooked on its hinges. Inside, the air smelled of earth and decay. Flint coughed. A fine place for ghosts. Perhaps, said Poirot, crouching to inspect the floor. Or for secrets. Near the back wall, beneath a tangle of ivy, he found something half buried, a wooden trapdoor, its edges concealed beneath soil and roots. Flint knelt beside him. Well, I'll be. How long do you think this has been here? Poirot brushed the surface clean with his handkerchief. Long enough for guilt to grow moss upon it. They prized it open. A musty smell rose from below, damp stone, old straw, the ghost of something once alive. Poirot descended first, lantern in hand. The passage beneath was narrow, carved from earth and brick, leading beneath the house itself. At the far end lay a small chamber, its walls lined with rotting crates. But what drew their eyes was the iron bed frame in the corner, and the faint outline of a small figure beneath a moth-eaten blanket. Flint froze. Good Lord! Poirot moved closer. The form was skeletal, long dead, but one hand still clutched a faded locket. Inside, beneath the cracked glass, was a tiny photograph, the same young woman from the box, Eliza Hughes. Poirot bowed his head. So. She did not drown. Flint swallowed hard. Then she was kept here. But by whom? Poirot's voice was low. That, mon ami, is the question. Lord Ravenwell may have wished to silence her, but he died soon after. Someone else, someone within the house, must have known she was alive, and let her perish here. He turned to the crates. They bore faded shipping labels, marked Art Vale and Company, importers. Poirot's expression darkened. Ah. Our Monsieur Vale, again. Chapter 8, The Final Curtain. The next morning broke calm and cold, the mist lying low across the gardens of Ravenwell Hall. The storm had passed, and with it the air of unease that had hung over the place for weeks. But though the house was still, its inhabitants were not. In every corridor and drawing-room, whispers followed in Poirot's wake, whispers of discovery, of guilt, of release. Hercule Poirot himself sat at the great dining table, a small cup of hot chocolate before him and the morning paper neatly folded beside his plate. His moustaches were immaculate, his attire perfectly pressed, his manner one of serene contentment. Only Inspector Flint disturbed the peace, bursting in with his usual lack of ceremony. "Morning, Poirot," he said, sitting down heavily. "I hardly slept. The whole business, ghastly. That's what it is. The woman's body, the secret chamber, that poor housekeeper. I'll never get the smell of damp out of my coat." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, mon ami, a detective must sometimes endure unpleasant fragrances in the pursuit of truth. Consider it the cologne of justice." Flint chuckled despite himself, but his brow furrowed. "You know, there's something still gnawing at me. You said the truth was served, but you stopped short of saying who killed the girl." She may have been kept there by old Lord Ravenwell, but someone locked that trapdoor. Someone let her die. Poirot set down his cup gently. You are perceptive, my friend. Indeed, that last question has troubled me also. For the time of death was not during the old lord's life, but years after his passing. That means another hand, someone living, someone close, sealed her fate. Flint's eyes widened. You're saying she was alive after the old man died? Poirot nodded gravely. Oh, It is simple when one observes the details. The blanket was of newer weave, from a pattern introduced only 6 years ago. The shoes, those pitiful little shoes near the bed, were marked by the cobbler of Market Hollow, whose shop did not open until 1924. And the candle stubs we found beside her bed, they were made from tallow mixed with synthetic wax, a mixture developed not before 1930. Flint stared. Good Lord, then who kept her there? Poirot looked toward the window, where the first rays of morning touched the frost-silvered glass. That, Inspector, is the final piece of our puzzle, and today, it shall be placed. By mid-morning, Poirot had summoned the remaining residents of the hall to the library once more. The great room felt different now, less oppressive, as though the ghosts had drawn back to listen. Lady Ravenwell entered first, pale and composed, followed by Mrs. Hughes, her face drawn and eyes hollow from sleeplessness. Richard Vale came last, nervous and irritable, his movements jerky. Poirot stood before the fire, his small frame erect, his gaze commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, once more you grant me your patience. I ask only that you listen, and that no word be spoken until I have finished. He waited until the room fell silent. Then he began. When first I arrived at Ravenwell Hall, I believed I was to solve a theft. A simple case of stolen jewels, n'est-ce pas? But in truth, what was taken from this house was far greater than gold, it was a life, a name, and the peace of all who live within these walls. He began to pace, his polished shoes tapping softly against the oak floor. We have learned that Eliza Hughes, a poor girl seduced and abandoned, was not drowned as believed, but imprisoned here beneath the earth. For years she lingered, waiting, forgotten. But who locked her away? Who visited that chamber and ensured her silence? Poirot turned suddenly, his eyes sharp as glass. It was you, Mrs. Hughes. The housekeeper gasped, staggering back a step. No. I swear. Poirot raised a hand. Silence, if you please. You see, madam, though you have played the role of the guilty avenger, in truth you were both victim and executioner. At first, you pitied your sister. You brought her food, blankets, words of comfort. But the years passed, and the sight of her, ruined, bitter, unrepentant, filled you with loathing. She had shamed you, ruined your position, destroyed your peace. You began to think of her not as a sister, but as a curse upon your life. And one day, when despair overcame pity, you closed the trapdoor and walked away. Mrs. Hughes sank into a chair, trembling. I tried to help her, she whispered. At first I did. But she hated me, she called me a hypocrite, said I'd always been jealous. And then, one night, she struck me, clawed at my face like an animal. I locked the door to punish her, just for a day, but when I returned, she covered her face with shaking hands. She was dead. A long silence followed. Even Flint, usually gruff and impatient, looked stricken. Poirot spoke softly. And after that, madam, you buried her with silence, until her voice began to haunt your nights. When the map was found, you saw a chance for redemption. You wished to make amends by exposing the truth. But you could not confess directly, so you staged a theft, hoping it would lead to discovery. You wished for justice, but without shame. Mrs. Hughes wept quietly. I only wanted it to end. Poirot inclined his head. And now, perhaps, it will. The law must take its course, but I believe, Inspector, that mercy will temper it. This woman's crime was born of guilt and grief, not malice. Flint nodded solemnly. I'll see to it. After Mrs. Hughes was led away, the room remained heavy with silence. Lady Ravenwell stood by the window, looking out toward the misty lawns. She was with us all those years, she said softly. Poor woman. And poor girl. What a legacy my husband left behind. Poirot stepped beside her. Madam, the sins of the dead often live on in the hearts of the innocent. But now, at last, the chain is broken. She turned to him, her expression weary but grateful. You have brought truth to this house, Monsieur Poirot. Even if it is a painful one. He smiled gently. Truth, madam, is like the dawn, it may dazzle the eyes, but it warms the soul. That afternoon, Poirot and Inspector Flint departed Ravenwell Hall together. The carriage rolled down the long drive beneath bare trees, the great house receding into mist behind them. Flint broke the silence first. You know, Poirot, I'll never understand how you do it. I'd have called the case closed a dozen times over. Poirot chuckled softly. It is simple, mon ami. You look for facts, I look for feelings. The heart, you see, always betrays the truth. When Mrs. Hughes spoke of her sister, there was too much hate in her pity. It was the hatred of one who had looked too long upon what she could not forgive. Flint shook his head. You and your psychology. Still, I can't argue with results. You've done it again. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Ah, but no, Inspector. I have only listened to what others chose not to hear. As the carriage turned the final bend, Poirot looked back once more at the grey outline of Ravenwell Hall. Smoke curled from the chimneys, mingling with the fog like the last breath of a long-kept secret. He murmured softly, the ghosts are laid to rest. Flint glanced at him. What was that? Poirot smiled. Nothing, mon ami. Merely a reflection. There is always a kind of sadness when a mystery ends, n'est-ce pas? For one has grown fond of it, even as one destroys it. Flint laughed. Only you would feel sorry for a solved case. Ah, said Poirot, straightening his tie with satisfaction, but without mystery, what is life? It is order without charm, logic without music. And so I am content, for tomorrow, there will be another puzzle, another crime, another soul to study. The carriage rolled on through the morning mist, leaving behind the old estate and its buried sorrows. And as the first sunlight broke through the clouds, glinting on his polished shoes, Hercule Poirot closed his eyes, folded his hands, and smiled. The little grey cells, he murmured to himself, have earned their rest.